Thanks very much and welcome everyone. Hello, my name is Torkel Harkness and today we're going to look at connecting your applications to your data using APIs. What is an API? Well, you can go to any cow in the world and they have a standard method of accessing milk. It can be done using a manual process or automated with either, don't forget to use soap. That's a techie protocol joke. If you get that, you can relax till about slide 4. A more technical explanation of an API or application programming interface is an API is a set of instructions that provides a level of abstraction which one application or system can access another within set boundaries. In other words, without referring to the cows again, it means that one app can talk to another app or system. And this can include, but is not limited to, cross-departmental communications, cross-company sharing of data. API technology is not based on one provider, it's the culmination of the successes and best practices of the main providers over the last 15 years. REST and JSON or JSON, depending on your pronunciation preference, is becoming the most popular method or certainly most widely accepted as it's easier to deploy and consume. Although XML APIs have been used since the original Salesforce APIs back in the year 2000. However, JSON parsers are fast, small and uncomplicated. Whether you're technical or not, APIs are very likely something that you're using already. It may be a YouTube app on your smartphone, a GPS map application. Many of the map apps use the Google Maps API to connect to map or location data. Or you might simply just use Salesforce, which was built up around web APIs and arguably one of the major factors in the increase in software as a service over the last 10 years. I say short history, it's actually probably one of my longest slides. It's by no means a comprehensive list, but some of the more interesting landmarks. In 1999, Salesforce launches software as a service infrastructure. It was the end of 1999 and on into 2000, beginning of 2000. In 2000 again, eBay's developer program is announced. The eBay API allowed eBay technology to be woven into existing sites and future e-commerce ventures. Jumping to 2004, the Flickr API was introduced and quickly defined their business. It showed the possibilities, certainly, of what APIs could do for business ventures. Google Maps API, which we've alluded to already. Many APIs have been developed because people have been scraping data from a site or using hacked or modified APIs to gain data. In fact, in 2006, Twitter announced that because of the various scrapes of their site, they thought it was about time that they helped out, and they released the Twitter API. And well, 2006, what a year that was. Google Ajax Search allows you to put Google search box on your own website. Amazon S3 was launched, and later that same year, Amazon EC2, which is another RESTful API. Using APIs to build an entire infrastructure is really quite something. We know the internal process from a rant that previous employee Steve Yege posted accidentally, or he posted it, but it was accidentally shared globally, which is a thing that tends to happen on the internet quite often. It's such an incredible story that's worth mentioning here. However, I do recommend you read the entire post in your own time, as it does explain it in much more detail. Steve complains about the micromanaging Jeff Bezos, which he describes as a regular Steve Jobs, but without the fashion or design sense. And not to be taken wrong, Bezos is super smart. While he often handed out these mandates, which sent everyone scurrying back in 2002, give or take a year, he issued a mandate that was just so out there, so huge, it made all of the others look like nothing. The mandate stated, let me read this out for you, all teams must from now on expose their data through service interfaces. All teams must communicate with each other through these interfaces. No other forms of communication are allowed, no direct linking, no direct reads, no shared memory, no backdoors whatsoever. All interfaces must be derived and designed from the ground up. Anyone who doesn't do this will be fired. Have a nice day. Now, to think what that entailed for the Amazon employees. If you were in sales and you needed some numbers, say from marketing, you weren't allowed to just hook up to the marketing drive. You needed to use an API. Over the next couple of years, Amazon transformed themselves into a service-oriented architecture. And while making many hundreds of discoveries along the way, both good and bad, what Bezos did was realize that Amazon needs to be a platform. And so now they have Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud and lots of other AWS services hosting the backends for some pretty successful companies. If I were in charge of what was then just an online bookstore, I doubt that something so radical would be planned or certainly foreseen. It may sound a little extreme, but it does give an example of how far you can go with API infrastructure. The Facebook development program, launched that same year, became hugely popular as a social platform. I think we can all look back at Farmville with differing memories. As mentioned already, as a response to other people scraping the site, in 2010, Instagram shut down a rogue API and then announced they were building their own. And in 2011, they released their own API, and a radical increase in Instagram began through the API. Launching in 2005, Programmable Web has been monitoring the global API economy while amassing the web's most relied on directory for public APIs. In 2013, its library listed over 10,000 internet-based APIs. Right now, I checked, it lists 11,500 and growing. Thanks again to Programmable Web's numbers, we can see the increase in the number of web APIs. There we go. Due to the popular benefits and many uses of APIs, the increase, while being self-explanatory, visually it's quite impressive. These numbers are, of course, public APIs. Often open APIs are often useful for startups. For example, Twitter's API enabled the company to build a presence on every mobile platform before they even had an internal mobile development team. Netflix was able to offer their service on more than 800 physical devices without any internal development, only by encouraging an external developer base of more than 20,000. While you may not consider yourself as having that kind of development or deployment, it is worth considering that while everyone is talking about big data always has to start off as little data. A private API can also be extremely useful, from sales or marketing to developers or executives. We all have different access models. A little bit like the fable of the stork and the fox, unable to eat each other's dinner. They can eat the same thing, but the access model is different. Actually, this is it's probably a bad one. I'm not going to elaborate anymore. I'm only going to end up talking about developers licking their plate or executives drinking from champagne flutes, but you get the idea. We all know it's good business to help those around you, and to help others work more efficiently and effectively can just be as simple as API access. As a short example of sharing data between your users or partners, I'd like to show you an example of an API call. We have a small app that runs inside a web browser and uses a special API call to fetch business glossary information from TeamServer. So I'm going to switch to a web browser, and you can see the TeamServer interface. I'm going to log in here. Yeah, very good. And straight away you can see my homepage. My glossaries are listed here, and inside those glossaries are a number of terms. The TeamServer interface is a great way of viewing the glossary data from the database. The terms I can list, I can search for, I can filter here in the Terms tab. However, should I be, for example, browsing a report on our intranet and I can see a term that I would like to check the definition of, I may not be sure if it's in the glossary. So I would need to log in and check, and rather than log into a separate application, I can use the API functionality of our glossary tooltip. If it's listed in any of the glossaries, then you'll see that term underlined. I'm going to just open a tab. I'm going to use Wikipedia as an example, and I'm just going to type in customer, and straight away anything that is in any words that are in our glossaries are underlined. You'll see we've got customer, Six Sigma. Of course, there are other features programmed into the tooltip that are not only the API call. I can click on the definition and be taken straight to the term within the Team Server interface. And I can do things like look up a related term, which for customer there is. The sales and marketing have different definitions. Using an API, it allows us to connect our standard internet browser application to our Team Server install. While this is a very simple example, it does show the beauty of how seamless data sharing can be using APIs. Using an API to allow your users to interact with your data can not only create more uses for your data, but it can give your users a more effective and efficient system. Certainly, it can give those that access the data more flexibility. Using an API can also limit the access that the user or system has to your data, giving an inherent security layer. The data can be used from within other applications, as we've seen with the glossary tooltip, and I have a further demo to show that working beautifully as well. And of course, engaging with your customers or potential customers by using other people's APIs. APIs are normally talked about as the big public offerings, Twitter and Facebook being two of those. So whenever you see examples of APIs, it can be very easy to think, well, that's just Facebook and Twitter data, which is not really what my business is about. It is worth noting that Facebook and Twitter both generate revenue by selling access to the high quality streams and some of the big analytics. So while you may not have plans to share your business data with your business partners or customers, it is something worth mentioning while we discuss APIs in business. And certainly with President Obama's executive order making open and machine readable the new default for government information means that we will also be seeing a lot more APIs as government data is made available privately and publicly. API benefits. Technology goes through lots of different phases. Some come and go, others keep growing. We have touched on some of the benefits that other companies have had from using APIs. Certainly it was not that many years ago that people were focused on making web apps for their business, assuming that everyone will have access to the internet in the future, and so the need was to plan to have the users able to access this through an internet browser, as it was the most common method of attaching to any internet-based data. This was great. It started the trend for developers to ensure compatibility and reduce platform-dependent systems. APIs can further increase compatibility as the interface does not really care what the back end is. I was speaking to a colleague this week who works with database systems. I shan't say which or which company, but he said sometimes suppliers, referring to his company, invoice multiple times if they haven't received their money, and the admin enters the invoice in the payment system twice. The system checks for this, but often admins add a period or space to get around the invoice number checks. He ran a SQL script to look at the duplicate invoice payments against the database and found 1.3 million UK pounds in duplicate payments, which of course were immediately due for refund. The company did employ staff to check for these errors, so while the staff was pretty upset, the company was more likely going to be a little bit more upset. It may sound a little Skynet, removing the humans from the loop, but in some cases there can be a distinct business advantage. So rather than having users enter details on yet another interface, an API is a programmatic connection, reducing the chances of errors. In fact, if they'd allowed an API connection from their customers to the customer's own data, they could let their customers view all the payments they had made, and perhaps the customers would not have processed the double payment in the first place. Accessing your data using simple API calls can certainly simplify the architecture and reduce disparate systems. The example of accessing the data directly from the browser showed how you can reduce the requirement to run a separate interface. Access to your data is clean and efficient. In fact, the new Twitter interface uses APIs to access their own back-end data. Rather than directly connecting to their own systems, they found the API method more advantageous. And certainly, there's many examples of when non-sharing of data has caused problems. Allowing securely defined access to your important data is most definitely a way to go to give your users the best opportunities. So the API, apart from looking at YouTube videos and finding the nearest restaurant, APIs can definitely be useful for your enterprise. We've seen an API working, but now we can break down what is actually happening and have a look of it in action. An API uses a programming language to place calls for information. For security or authentication, a security key or client ID may be required. Web APIs can use URLs and HTTP language verbs like get, post, put and delete, and we can have a look at those shortly. You can see here from the example API call to the New York Times website, and you can see the New York Times website from the green location. Let me just add it again. There we go. It asks for a hardcover fiction list listed in blue, the language JSON, and finally you've got my client key on the end. There's no authentication secret or any other security as the host does not require it. So I'm going to just switch over to a web browser, open up another tab, and I'm going to paste in the very same request. Very simply in the address bar. The response is fairly raw. To show you how you may format the response if your application was receiving the data, you can use a simple REST client. I have one here installed on Firefox, and I'm going to paste in again the same request. There we go. Okay, so response headers. This client does give you the header response. There's the raw form. Anytime. What's going on? Let's do it again. There we go. Okay, so there's the raw response which we had earlier, just by pasting it into the address bar, and you can see there's different ways of highlighting it. And then the preview here, which we will see also in the little Java client, which I'm going to run for you next. Right, I'm going to log into my Team Server application with the small Java app. Now, this application simulates the kind of API calls that you can have in your own application, allowing you to gain access to your own quality company data from within your business application. And so rather than having different interfaces for each set of data, you can use API calls to keep all of your data views in a single multi-use interface. Quite simply, using a similar method as we did with the New York Times request, although this time there's more security in place with our client ID, secret, username and password, and certainly more options. So to begin with, I'll start up the Java app. And just run that. There. Now we do make this small app available so you can see how well the API works and have a go with all of the different options available. I'll just type in the address for my Team Server installation and click connect. And you'll see there the default options which I'm using. Oh, I'm already connected. Okay, so we saw the business glossaries earlier in the Team Server interface, and I can, via an API call, double click that, I can get a listing. Boom, there we go. That was quick. I can get a listing of all of the business glossaries. The output is basic and has simple formatting. Of course, the formatting is dependent on how you would like to display it. The other REST client we used showed different options, and of course the Team Server web front end shows a further method of display. Let's go back to the Team Server interface, and you can see the glossaries listed there. Now, we have a number of terms available as well. So let's go back to the Java application and we'll do a get on the business terms. Go. Still quick. There's a lot more. There's a lot more business terms here. And let's choose one at random. Okay, 611, ID 611. So /611, and we will do a get on just that term, just so we can see the formatting nice and clear. And from here, we can also choose other options. There's various different commands available that I can use. The HTML verbs I mentioned previously in the slides are listed here: get, post, put, and delete. I'm going to choose put, which is update. And let's update the description. Copy that. In the request, just format it correctly. I apologize for my keyboard thumping. I realized I have been doing that. It's my two-finger touch typing. And let's change this to something nice and bold so we can see. We're on put, and then we'll go. Straight away you can see it's updated the description in the response window. Now if we go back to the web browser, let's do a search for test. And that's our one there. And straight away you can see the definition has changed in Team Server. Super fast, super simple, secure access to your data. And as it is an API, you can program all of this into your own application and have your glossaries and terms or your model data right down to your entities, exactly where you want them in your own program interface. And the great thing here is that as the API interface is already built in, you can plan to use APIs with your business data before you start using Team Server, or after you've already built up your data models and have been using it for a while. So in summary, just to go over what we've covered today, APIs are basically a simple interface that allow various back-end systems good compatibility, and of course I learned that cows can make a very good API analogy. The growth of APIs has been incredibly rapid, and even if there is a slowdown, the benefits are already well proven in many different areas, from social media to governments. We also touched on some businesses' complete shifts to API integration, and while some ideas are just crazy enough to work, most companies may not need such a drastic approach. Solid business rules of good communication and data sharing in your organization are still key ideas even when modern technology is involved. So for example, the glossary tooltips we looked at, even with a basic level of API functionality, showed how incredibly effective sharing data can be for your users, creating efficient use of back-end data. APIs do not always have to be about liking this or following that. Solid business use of APIs which can bring all of your data together and help others utilize company data more effectively are always going to be appreciated in any organization. If you're inspired to consider an API for your business, you can easily start by going to our website and downloading a trial. We have the Java application available as well to download for free, and a comprehensive wiki that's an absolute goldmine should you need any further information. Of course, there are other videos available as well, and we do have some of the APIs in action should you wish to see some more. I hope you'll hang around today. We have some fantastic speakers coming up, some really incredible sessions over the next couple of days. I would also like to thank you for your time today. Should you be one of the many success stories of companies that benefited from an API implementation, please feel free to let me know so I can tell everyone about your fabulous success story on my next presentation. I think we're going to take some questions. We have some coming in. I also have David Cartagena here. He's one of the developers, and he's been coding some of the API as well, so we're fully set for technical questions.
Okay, Frank asks, what's the difference among APIs, DLLs, and frameworks? Boy, that's a very broad question, right?
Yes, hence my answer was a little vague, but yeah, it is fairly a broad-ranging question. But there are a number of differences. which I did cover, obviously.
Yep.
Unless you want to say anything else on that, David?
No, it's a general question, so there are a lot of differences, but there is no right answer for the question. So you can find out a lot of differences.
It seems like in today's world, there's either a custom API where they give you the programming interface, or a lot of products are providing REST interface, which is a standard way to get at APIs, but at the same time, those APIs have different parameters. They have different method or URIs. So the good news is most people are documenting what those programmatic interfaces are. And Frank then went on to say, do you consider database connector technologies like ODBC or JDBC, consider them APIs? I mean, they have their own APIs, right? But those are connectors for the database. And I chimed in because I had remembered and maybe it's still today, you can respond, Torkel. ER Studio has an API itself for being automated, right? Using, I think it's COM interface APIs on Windows where there's a built-in scripting language, sort of like Visual Basic, but you can also use external tools to automate ER Studio or get information out of ER Studio, data models and so on.
Yeah, they use there's a good scripting setup within ER Studio to customize some of the models and stuff. We also use an API directly from DB Artisan that uses an API to go straight into Team Server as well. So they're pretty much in use everywhere at the moment.
Yeah, as far as
I also see another one from Winston Blackwell here asking about whether APIs are open to malicious abuse, which I think, if you say no, it's definitely not, then you're going to be proved wrong at some point, aren't you? Really, we do have some good security. We use the OAuth as a standard on the Team Server API, but as I showed in the New York Times, they only require a simple login. So it depends what you set up to begin with as to whether somebody's going to think, well, actually I can use my client ID to get further information. That it's if you don't lock it down well enough, of course it's open to malicious abuse. But we do have fairly tight security on the Team Server API at the moment.
I was just going to chime in that even if you use OAuth, OAuth 2, if you use secure socket layer over the wire, you still need to, as a writer, look at the parameters that are coming in. There's classic SQL insertion tricks that people try and so on. So you still have to be aware of what's coming into your system and who is coming in, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
For the Team Server, does it automatically use HTTPS or secure socket, or do you have to set that up?
You have to set it up in the installation, but it's already working. So anyway, we also check all the parameters when the user types anything, so we avoid this malicious abuse.
Cheryl's asking, is there any connection or integration with business intelligence tools like Information Builder's InfoAssist? Is there any way to hook things together, or do you have to do custom work?
I don't know that one at the moment. We can find that out and come back to Cheryl on that one.
Okay. I always look for APIs, whether it's a website, an infrastructure piece, backend service. I look for documentation on an API to see if there's something I can do to automate, and if there is on both sides, maybe I can do something in the middle if there isn't a direct support between two dissimilar and external tools. Sometimes you can export something and import something manually, I'm not sure if there's a. I know the Meta facility can do some integration to some other modeling tools, right? I'm not sure about team server integration in that respect.
We do some business intelligence reports in the application, but they are not developed in the API. I guess we never had a customer or anybody asking for it. But we do have these reports in the application.
Okay. All right. So we'll leave Cheryl. We'll leave that other one open for now, and when somebody tracks down the possibility, they can put that in. Any other questions for Torkel or for Ron and Joyce and Oz? And Rob, you're still there. We're still doing some research for your earlier questions from the 8 a.m. hour. So, and Paul, we see your DB Artisan question as well. So, I see Cheryl saying, so our biggest dilemma is how we can populate the metadata from our models into the business intelligence tools. Any ideas, Torkel?
Well, you can get the info of the models from the API, and then you can handle all this data however you want. Depending on your interest, but you can do whatever you want with this data.
You could export the metadata from a table, right? And do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can, yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy, what kind of protection from denial of service attack calling millions of API calls? For me, Winston, that's done at the network level and at the server levels where you can defend against ping attacks or other denials of service. I don't think of that at the application level, but if somebody's calling an API millions of times, I guess you'd have to think about restricting how many API calls from a specific connected client. Is there anything, Torkel, that a team server or whatever does if somebody decides to hit an API or all the APIs millions of times?
No, not that I'm aware of. I would be where you are on that one, really, because a sort of firewall layer really that you would pick that up at.
Maybe there's something at the IIS or Apache level if somebody's going through an HTTP request. I'm not aware of anything specific there, but yeah. Okay, we have just a couple more minutes, another few minutes if you have other questions. And again, Joyce and Ron, Oz, if you catch up on some of the previous questions, that's okay too. Anything else that, Torkel, you guys would like to add after the presentation?
Well, yeah, it would have been nice actually to have included a little bit about the DB Artisan monitoring and the API connection for that. But that's I think that'll be for next time. But it's something that we'll definitely include on the next one. The monitoring of the data sources is quite impressive too. So maybe somebody might catch up in one of the presentations over the next couple of days. That'd be pretty exciting to see. So.